In this video, I'll show you how to summon a spiritual weapon. But this one's going to be a little bit different. Instead of me just showing you how to run the code, we're going to actually write the script that creates that spiritual weapon. So we're going to make a script that goes through, puts a token automatically on the battlefield, assigns the token so that it's controlled by whoever summoned it. It'll have an aura around it, and that aura will be visible to all players. We'll also put a note in the chat box, and we will give a nice burst of holy energy as the weapon comes into existence. Okay, so the first thing we need to do before we write any code in this is we need an image for our spiritual weapon. So go out to the internet, search around for a mace or a warhammer or whatever weapon it is that your cleric likes to use, and upload that into your library. I've created one already, so I'm just going to use that. Found this nice ornate mace. Once you've got this uploaded into your library, drag it on to the battlefield, and then press Z. So you get the zoomed in view of the image. Now right click on that and select copy image address. We're going to need that image address for later on. So right now what you want to do is just put that into another text editor or something. Just keep this URL handy because this will be important later. There is one tweak that we need to make to this, and that is we have to change this word original to thumb. And when Roll20 gets an image uploaded to it, it has the full-size image and it has the thumbnail version of it. And when we use the API wants thumbnails. So take your image, paste in the URL, change the word original to thumb, and then just hang on to this URL because we're going to use this a little bit later on. Okay, so that's the prerequisite piece. Now let's get into how we actually start writing the code. Okay, so you notice I have two tabs open right now, one for my game and one for my game's settings. So this is where we're going to do most of our work, is in here. So go in, go to settings, and then select API scripts. All right. When you first come in, if you don't have any scripts set up in your campaign, you will get a message telling you that no scripts exist for the campaign. Okay, well, let's change that. We're going to make a new script right now. And I'm going to call this script spiritualweapon.js. Okay. Now, I'm also going to zoom in a little bit, make this a little bit bigger so it'll be a little easier to read. There we go. Okay. Now, the thing to know as we begin is that Roll20 is always listening for events that occur either in chat or on the battlefield or things like that. And so when those events happen, it performs an operation. You know, if you've used an API script before, like if you've used token mod or you've used group init, you know that Roll20 is listening for somebody to type token mod and then some operation into the chat box. And then when it receives that command, it begins doing whatever operations have been specified. So what we need to do is tell Roll20 to start listening for our message. And we'll do that like this. It's going to be on, open parenthesis, open quote, double quote that is, chat : message. So we're saying when a chat message comes in, comma, function MSG. So what we're saying here is when the chat message comes in, we're going to take the message and we are going to perform whatever operations are in between these two curly braces right here. So we're going to fill those in. And then the last thing you want to do is put a semicolon at the end of the line. That tells JavaScript that this command has been completed. But we need to say, all right, what are we doing when this message comes in? So I'm going to press enter a few times to give myself some white space to work with here. What we want to do next is check to see if the message that was typed into the chat box is our spiritual weapon command. And so the first thing we're going to do there is say if msg type equals API. And what this is saying is the message that was typed into the chat box an API command? And the way that Roll20 knows that is if the command begins with an exclamation point. So you may have seen when we're doing other videos that all of the API commands begin with an exclamation point. And that's what tells Roll20 that's an API command to execute. So we're checking, is this something that is an API command? And we also want to make sure that it's our spiritual weapon command, right? Because if it's something else, we don't want to do this. So we're going to say ampersand, ampersand. So we're saying if it's message type API, and that's what the two ampersands mean, and message content index of open parenthesis exclamation point spiritual weapon equals 0. Okay, so what is going on here? So we're saying, is the message type API, so does it start with an exclamation point, and does the message content, so message content is the actual body of the message, it's what was actually typed, does it contain spiritual weapon? Now you may be asking, what is this index of doing? So what this is doing is it's looking at the message that was typed into the box, and it's saying, where in that message does the phrase exclamation point spiritual weapon occur? And so equals 0 is checking to see if this is the first thing that was typed into the chat box. So like if I come in here and I type in exclamation point spiritual weapon, this is the first thing that was typed into the chat box. But if I had done this, if I had said like, you know, hello world spiritual weapon, then spiritual weapon is not the first item in the string anymore, right? It starts with hello world, so we're probably not trying to actually summon the spiritual weapon here. So we're checking to make sure that spiritual weapon is the first thing that was typed in the message. So assuming it is an API script and it is spiritual weapon, then we're going to do whatever is inside these two curly braces that I am typing right now. And the first thing that we want to do to start with, just to make sure that we've got the syntax of this right and everything is okay, we're just going to send that message back into the chat. We're going to say, we've summoned a spiritual weapon. So let's do that. That is going to be like this. Send chat. This is going to send a message back to the chat. Then who's sending the message, like who is actually speaking? We'll say it's the cleric. And then what are they saying? And we'll say, I summoned a spiritual weapon. Okay. Easy enough. So this is what we're going to start with. So we'll save the script. And when you save the script, you'll see the API sandbox will spin back up down here in the console. If you've got a syntax error in the script, if something, you know, is wrong, if you've forgotten to close your curly braces or something like that, that will throw an error message down here. But this looks okay, so let's go ahead and go back into our game. And now we can actually type in spiritual weapon. And boom, there we go. We see the cleric, I summoned a spiritual weapon. Fantastic. So we've got the syntax of our initial command correct. Okay, but now let's build on this, right? If we open up this token, we see this token has a name. This is Cassandra. I'd really like the script to say that Cassandra summoned the spiritual weapon instead of just the cleric summoned a spiritual weapon. So in order to do that, we're going to need to select the token when we run the command, and then the script will be able to read information about that token. So let's see how that works. I'm going to put my cursor at the beginning of this line, and we're going to add these commands above that send chat command. And the first thing we're going to put in is var selected equals msg selected. Now what this is saying is we're creating a new variable called selected, and we're setting it equal to whatever objects were selected on the board when this message was sent in. So, you know, you can have a single object selected, you can have multiple objects selected at a time in Roll20. And whatever is currently selected gets sent in as that MSG selected. This message selected property is actually what's called an array. And if you're not familiar with JavaScript, an array is a collection of objects. So right now I have 2 tokens selected, so my array contains 2 items, one for Cassandra's token and one for the kobold's token. If only Cassandra was selected, then the array would contain 1 item. So this is just kind of how that works. You can have a ton of things selected at a time. Again, if you've used group init, you know that you can select like 10 tokens at a time. That would mean that there would be 10 items in the array. But we just want to get the first item that's selected because we're planning on only having 1 spiritual weapon at a time, right? You select your cleric, you click spiritual weapon, that's it. There's no such thing as a mass spiritual weapon where the cleric can summon like 10 spiritual weapons for all their friends, though that would be pretty epic. But basically, like I said, we want to get just that 1 token that is currently selected. So to do that, we're going to create another variable. We're going to call this var token, and we're going to set this equal to get object graphic, and this is going to be selected 0._id. Okay, so what does this mean? All right, well, we're creating a reference to the token that is selected. So get object means we're getting the graphic, and graphic is how Roll20 refers to tokens and maps. So we're getting a reference to that token, and the token that we're getting a reference to has an ID of selected 0id. So what does this mean? Okay, well, you remember earlier we got a reference to the array of all the items that were currently selected, right? Well, the selected open bracket and then the number represents which of those items we are working with. So if we had 2 items in the array, we would specify that we wanted to work with which of those items. But the thing to know about JavaScript is 0 based, meaning that the first item in the array is not number 1, it's actually number 0. And then the second item in the array is number 1, and then number 2, and so on. So all of your counting starts at 0 with JavaScript. So I'm saying give me the first item that's selected and tell me its ID. So this essentially is the same thing as coming into the UI here and typing in selected token ID. That's going to give you this command, this string here, referencing that's what this token's ID is. This is essentially doing the exact same thing. So now that we've got a reference to that token, we can begin querying its properties and learning more about it and using that information in the script. So the first thing that we want to do here is change this, the cleric, we want to change that to the name of the token that's currently selected. And so for that, what we're going to do is say toke get name. All right, so this is saying get the name property of that token. And then we'll save the script. Okay, and we're going to come back in here. I'm going to highlight Cassandra, and I'm going to do my command again. And you can see now, Cassandra summoned a spiritual weapon. So it was actually reading that property right off the token. If I wanted to, I could highlight my kobold, do the same thing, and kobold summoned a spiritual weapon, which would be mildly terrifying. But the point is now you can select whichever token you want, and the script is going to substitute the name of the token into this spot right here. Okay, but what happens now if we don't select something and try to run that command? Let's see what happens there. Okay, well, it doesn't look like anything happens. So let me try again. Let me highlight Cassandra here and spiritual weapon. And, oh, hang on, nothing came through. Why is that? Well, let's have a look at our API. And you notice in the console, we've got this really angry looking error saying cannot read property 0 of undefined. Well, what does that mean? Well, what that means was we came into the script and we tried to get a selected item, right? Message selected should have given us our array, but because nothing was selected, no array was created. So there is no array to query. And so when we hit this line, we tried to look at the first item of an array that didn't exist, and so now we got this problem. So what we want to do is just build a little bit of error handling for this, and that's pretty straightforward. We're going to put your cursor in between the selected and toke line here, and we're going to say if open parenthesis, selected equals equals equals, so 3 equals undefined, then open bracket and close bracket, what we're going to do is we're going to send a chat message, and we're going to say API, and please select a character. All right, and then we're going to return. So what's happening here is if selected equals undefined, and the triple equals operator in JavaScript is checking to see if selected is identical to undefined. So if it is undefined, then we are going to send a chat message saying please select a character, and then we're going to return. And what the return does is jumps out of this function. So we leave this script altogether at this point, and we're just going to continue on. That will allow the API to continue on gracefully rather than getting that scary red error message here. So we're going to save this. Okay, everything is spun back up. And now we're going to go back into our script. Let's just make sure this is working again, right? Okay, so Cassandra summoned the spiritual weapon. Now I'm going to click off of Cassandra. Nothing is currently highlighted. And now we get a message saying, please select a character. Okay, so now I should be able to select Cassandra again. And there we go. So that error checking is working properly. So with that done, now let's actually get the spiritual weapon onto the board. So to do this, we're going to use a command called create object. And like I said earlier with the get object, graphic is a token. So we're going to create a graphic object this time. So we're going to say create object graphic. And then the object is going to have a list of properties. And those properties are going to be defined inside of these curly braces here. So I'm just going to, again, give myself some white space. And the first property that we want to set on the token is where it is in the battlefield. And that's actually controlled by two different items. There's the left property of the token, and there's the top property of the token. So left is basically the x-axis, if you want to think about it like that, so where it is horizontally on the page, and then top is the y-axis, so where it is vertically on the page. Now, we want to place our spiritual weapon adjacent to the selected token. So what we can do is find out this token's left and top property, and then use those for our spiritual weapon token. So the left, what we'll say here, this will be toke get left, and then top, it will be toke get top. Now, the problem with this is that's going to summon this token directly on top of our cleric. We don't want that. We actually want it to be one square to the right of the cleric. So what we're going to do is get the token's left property, right? That's our selected token's left property, and then we want to add one square to that. So the way we figure that out is we look at our page settings, and that's this one right here. And on here you can see that a cell on the page is 70 pixels by 70 pixels. So each square on here is 70 pixels by 70 pixels. So if I want this new token to be one square to the right, we're going to add 70 to the selected token's left property. So that will move this one square to the right of the selected token. We're going to keep the top property the same because that's going to keep it at the same Y location on the battlefield. So it will be just this square rather than right on top of this token. Okay, so we've got our left and our top property set. We also need to set how high and wide we want the token to be. So you know how it works with D&D, you can have huge creatures, gargantuan creatures, tiny creatures. We want something that is essentially medium. So what we're going to do for that is we're going to say height, and we're going to set that to be 70 because we want it to fill or be as high as a single square, and we're going to make it one square wide as well. So it's going to be 70 pixels high and 70 pixels wide, which means it's going to fill up 1 square. We also need to say what page in our game do we want this token to appear on. And so that's this property called page ID. Now, page IDs are kind of challenging to retrieve without having a reference token. So we're really lucky that we're basically just trying to put this spiritual weapon on the same page as our selected token. So what we're just going to say here is toke.get page ID. So we're putting it on the same page as our selected token. And then we also need to say what layer on that page we want. So do you want it on the GM layer? Do you want it on the token layer? And we want it on the token layer, but the token layer is called objects. So, oops, I got an extra colon there. Okay, so we're going to put it on the objects layer. And then the final thing we have to specify for right now is what picture will this token have. So we're going to use img_src, so image source. And now you're going to grab that URL that we saved earlier today. So I'm going to grab my URL, this thing right here, copy that, and enclose it in quotes. There we go. So the token will be placed 1 square to the right of our selected token. It will be placed at the same y-axis location. It's going to be 70 pixels high, 70 pixels wide. It's going to be on the same page as our selected token. It's going to be on the object layer or the token layer. And this is the picture that we're going to use. So let's save this and let's try it out. So we'll go back, wait till everything is spun up here. Okay, looks good. We're going to select Cassandra again, and we're going to do our spiritual weapon, and there we go. We have our weapon summoned onto the battlefield. How about that? All right. But let's take this a step further. If we open this up, we see this token has no name. It's not controlled by anybody. So, I mean, we could just manually assign this to our player once we summoned the token, but honestly, we don't need to. We can have that automatically assigned, and we can also have a name automatically provided to this as well. So let's do that. Let's enhance our script a little bit more. So we're going to go back to the script, and let's start out by giving the token a name. So that is a name property, and we're just going to say toke get name plus '(s) spiritual weapon. So what's going to happen here is we're going to get the name of the selected token. So that would be Cassandra in our example. So the name of the token will be Cassandra's spiritual weapon. All right, cool. But now we also want to assign that token to Cassandra's player so that they can control the spiritual weapon. And this one's a little bit more involved. If we look at the tokens, if I look at Cassandra's token right now, I can see there is a controlled by property, but that controlled by is determined by character settings. So what that means is we would need to find out who runs Cassandra by looking at Cassandra's character sheet. So if I alt-click on Cassandra's token, I can see here's the character sheet, and I can see that Cassandra is currently controlled by a player who's called NO. Okay, so we can do that same kind of detective work via the script. It's just going to take a couple of steps. We'll start out by saying, okay, what character does this token represent? That would let us look at the token's character sheet. And then who controls that character from the information on the sheet. So here's how we're going to do that. I'm going to actually come up here and I'm going to put a couple of lines after we get the token. And what I'm going to say here is var character equals get object character toke get represents. So we're going to look at the token that we've selected. We're going to find out what character that token represents, and then we get a reference to that character. That's what's happening right here. And now from that character, we can figure out who's driving the character. And we do that like this. We're going to say var player equals get object player, and we're going to use that to character.get controlled by. So, get the token, find out what character the token represents, look at that character, find out who controls the character, and assign that to player. So now what we're going to do is add a controlled by property here. So controlled by, and that's going to be player get ID. So now when the token summons in, it should have a name automatically assigned to it of the selected token's spiritual weapon, and it should be controllable by the same player that controls the selected token. So let's give this a try. I'm going to click save here, and let's go back to our game. I'm going to delete my initially summoned token. We'll highlight Cassandra again. Here we go. And you can see nothing happened. So if we look in here, we see that we have an error message, and I see what I did wrong. I forgot to put a comma at the end of my image URL. So safety tip, everyone, make sure that you separate all of these properties with commas. So I made that change. I'm going to click save. Now it should work. All right, take two. And there we go. We've got I summoned a spiritual weapon. Let's take a look, open up the token's properties. You can see now it has a name, Cassandra's spiritual weapon, and controlled by the same player as who was running Cassandra. So we've just made this script a little bit more useful. Now the player can automatically take control of that token. Now we could leave it just as that. This is a really useful script. This is great. But I want to jazz it up a little bit. So you notice the token kind of blends a little bit into the background here. I want it to appear as more than just scenery. So for that, what I want to do is actually set the token's aura so that it's visible to players and give it a little bit of a glow. You know, and I think that kind of fits with the theme of a spiritual weapon. So to make a bit of a glow, we're going to give the token a 0-foot aura, and we're going to make that aura visible to all players. So I'll click Save Changes here, and you can see we got that nice kind of glow effect going on here. So let's have the script automatically apply that effect as well. So we'll jump back into the code. Not going to forget to put my comma this time. And our new properties are going to be aura1_radius. That'll let us define how big the aura should be. We're going to set that to 0 like we just did in the dialog box. We're going to set the color of aura1. And the color is going to be a hexadecimal value. You can actually see that when you hover over the color window right here. So when you click on this, the value that's currently selected is what's displayed right here. So hashtag 4Fs. Actually, if I hover over it here, yeah, hashtag 4Fs, and then 00 will give me that yellow color. That's what I want. So we're going to jump into that. So that's going to be okay. And then lastly, we want to show the aura. We want it to be visible to players, and that property is show players aura1 is true. Now, quick sidebar. Some of you may be looking at this and going, Nick, how do you know what properties to set? Well, all of these properties are documented in Roll20. I'm going to include a link in the description of the video to where you can see a list of all the available properties and what their acceptable and expected values are. So is something going to be looking for true or false? Is something looking for a number? Is it looking for a string? That'll all be documented there. But we're going to set all these now. We're going to click Save Script again. Okay, we'll come back in here. I'm going to cancel out of this. We'll delete our previous spiritual weapon. We'll summon in a new one. And there we go. It's automatically summoned. It automatically has the aura assigned to it. And like we saw before, it has everything predefined with the controlled by and the name. Fantastic. But I want to do more. So right now, this token is just kind of appearing. It's not there. It's there. That's not dramatic enough. We are channeling the power of a god to summon a weapon made out of force. That, I think, warrants a special effect. So I want this token to come in a burst of holy energy. So let's have the script do that too. So after we send in our message to the chat box, let's do a special effect. And to create a special effect. The command is spawn fx. And then we need to specify the location of where the effect is going to occur. So that's the X and Y values again. So this will be the same as what we did earlier. It'll be token get left plus 70 by token get top. So it's going to be occurring at the same location that we spawned the spiritual weapon. Then we need to specify the type of effect we're looking for. So we're going to do a burst of holy. And then what page is this occurring on? And again, we're going to use toke get page ID. All right. So now when we save this, that should spawn in the token and then give it that burst of holy energy, which will give it a really nice flashy effect. So let's try this. Again, I'm going to delete this one. Select Cassandra. And boom, there we go. The spiritual weapon comes in with a burst of holy light. That's really dramatic and I think really suits this spell quite well. Okay, so one other tweak that you may want to make to the script, this one's optional. This is just more of your own preference. Right now, anybody who knows about the spiritual weapon command would be able to summon a spiritual weapon. You may want to just have the summoning be available to the GM. So if that's the case, what you can do is in the first if statement here, add another and we're going to say player is GM, and then we're going to put in msg.player ID. And so this checks to see whoever sent in the command, are they the GM of the game? And if they are, fantastic, the script will run. And if they're not, then the command will not execute. So that one is up to you if you want to include that or not, but I wanted to make you aware that it's a possibility. Now, there is one last thing that I do want to recommend for this. You notice that when I was doing this, I would save the script and then I'd come down here and I'd check to see that everything had loaded. You don't want to have to do that, right? You want to be able to just have the script run. So there is one more thing that we're going to do to the script. So come up to the very beginning, put in a new line, and I want you to select everything and then press tab. We're just going to indent this whole thing. And at the very top, we're going to put in on ready function. And then it's just 2 parentheses. We're going to delete this parenthesis right here. Okay. Press enter. We're going to open a curly bracket, come all the way down to the end, and then put a closing curly bracket, a closing parenthesis, and a semicolon, and then save. And what this does now is this tells the script to wait to try to do anything until the whole campaign has loaded. And that way, you're not going to trip over anything, right? Because if we tried to, say, invoke the spiritual weapon and everything hadn't loaded yet, then that may cause issues, may cause failures and whatnot in the API. So I've just saved this now. And again, just to make sure that everything is happy, we'll delete this spiritual weapon. We'll summon this one last time. Boom, there we go. And that's it. Now we have a spiritual weapon on the board. So there you go. We've written our first API script together. I hope you found this helpful. If you enjoyed this video, found it useful, please give it a like and consider subscribing. I'd also appreciate it if you could sound off in the comments if you liked this, if you'd like to see more videos like this. Please let me know, because I really want to make sure that whatever I'm putting out there is helpful to people. So thanks for watching, and have a great day.